Hi, my name is Puneeth. Welcome to my channel Everyday Space. In today's video, we're going to discuss about the past Martian missions and the new Mars 2020 rover that is going to be launching in July 2020. We're going to take a look at the history of all Martian missions and what makes the new Mars 2020 rover special and different from the others. So let's get started. Now let's take a look at the history of different Martian missions that have been sent to the surface of Mars. By the early 1960s, NASA shifted its focus to exploring Mars because at the time it was thought that there were many living things on the Martian surface and was much like Earth. That's why they sent a series of Mariner probes to photograph and do a flyby of the Martian atmosphere and surface. What they found out was, currently from the photographs, it seemed that there were no living things on the Martian surface, and that the Martian atmosphere was a lot thinner and denser, less dense than Earth's atmosphere. So this is why they want to explore more and see if their hypothesis is correct. So then sent many landers, the Viking landers, Insight, and Phoenix lander, to the Martian surface to explore more. The landers would land on the surface and take many measurements and photographs from the place where they landed. So they then found out that the Martian surface was quite easy to go through and that there's still no current life on Mars. But NASA scientists still were wondering if there was life on Mars in the past. This is why they sent 4 different rovers to the Martian surface: Sojourner, Spirit, Opportunity, and Curiosity. These 4 rovers were more advanced than the one before them. So why did we need rovers and how did they land down? NASA needed rovers because rovers are kind of like cars, remote control cars. You can move them around and take different measurements from different spots on the Martian surface. So they also had different methods of landing on the Martian surface because each one was heavier than the one before it. So let's take a look at how they landed. So the first rover, Sojourner, landed with a series of parachutes and a giant airbag which encompassed the vehicle. So the parachutes would then slow it down in the Martian atmosphere, and then it would deploy its airbags. The airbags were used, and then the rover would bounce a few times on the Martian surface and then come to a rest, and then the airbags would deflate, open up, and reveal the rover inside. This worked really well for the Sojourner because it wasn't that heavy and could easily bounce on the surface. But the next rovers, Spirit, Opportunity, and Curiosity, were much heavier than Sojourner. That's why they needed a different system to land on Mars. This is why they used a parachute like Sojourner to slow itself down in the Martian surface. It then used a powered descent module which had its own rockets to make a soft landing and touchdown on the Martian surface. But the parachutes for each vehicle were also different because of the different weights. The more heavier the rover is, the more complex the parachutes get. So this is how these 4 rovers landed and operated. So now let's take a look at the new Mars 2020 rover and how it is different from the rest of them and where can we find the similarities. The Mars 2020 rover has a lot of similarities to the Curiosity rover, as it has the main basic components and even looks almost identical to Curiosity. So now we're going to take a look at the 3 main differences that sets it apart from Curiosity. The first difference is the rover itself. The rover has new redesigned wheels to prevent it from getting stuck on the Martian surface. The next main thing is its onboard experiment called the Drill Core Sample Return. So this is where the robotic arm will stretch out in front of the vehicle, go onto the ground, and dig a sample into the Martian surface. It will then collect the core sample that it did from digging into the Martian surface, and then it will bring it back on board the rover. It will then do a few tests and send data back to NASA. NASA will then decide if it wants to actually keep this rock sample on board. If it does, these will later be deposited as a specific coordinate for a future Mars mission to go and retrieve them to bring them back to Earth. This is the main purpose of Curiosity and is the next step to finding out, is there really any life on Mars, or was there? So this has many other experiments such as Pixel, which finds out how thin the atmosphere is there, how much radiation there is, and a bunch of other experiments. This is the main difference that sets it apart from Curiosity. The second main difference that sets Mars 2020 rover apart from Curiosity is that the Mars 2020 rover holds a Martian helicopter. This will be the first time anything has ever flown on the Martian surface. Creating a Martian helicopter was a challenge because of the less air density on the Martian atmosphere. Because the helicopter doesn't have anything to go on top of, it can be difficult creating a helicopter. But it also is pretty easy because of the 40% less gravity on the Mars compared to Earth. So this would mean it has to use less force to get on in the air. The main purpose of this Martian helicopter is to get in places where the rover cannot. It can photograph on top of hills and cliffs and even inside of caves. This Martian helicopter will operate by solar panel, which sadly means it can only operate a short duration without having to recharge. JPL also did almost all the final testing and even put the helicopter in a simulate chamber, which means that it has already flown in a Mars environment with 1% of the air density and 40% less gravity. So the helicopter is now ready to fly on the Mars 2020 rover. The third main difference is NASA's new parachute. Like I said before, when the object that you're carrying gets heavier, you need to design a new parachute to handle the extra payload. Because the Mars 2020 rover is now 2 tons instead of Curiosity's 1 ton payload, they need to design a whole new parachute for this specific mission. They developed it and did numerous testing for this parachute. The final test, called the supersonic drop test, was where a supersonic sound rocket carried the parachute to a high altitude, and then the parachute deployed and carried a 3,000-pound payload back to the surface. So NASA certified this parachute, and the parachute is now ready to fly on Mars 2020 rover. Now let's take a look at the different components that NASA and JPL have already created to make the powered descent down to the Martian surface. So there you have the cruise stage. The cruise stage is where all the thrusters and solar panels are for the duration of the flight. Next to the cruise stage, you have the descent stage, which houses the rockets for the powered descent down to the Martian surface for a soft landing. So next to that, you have the aeroshell. It is inside the aeroshell that which you have a parachute, which will slow down the descent from the Martian atmosphere to the Martian surface. There you have the heat shield. The heat shield will ablate and then make the Mars 2020 rover survive the re-entry. All of this together will make this successfully land the Mars 2020 rover on Mars. All of these are already ready and are ready to fly. All of these will then take environmental testing to finally fly on the Mars. The astronauts also did a final driving test of the Mars 2020 rover to see if the wheels can actually hold the entire rover and if the suspension works correctly. Here they did a 360-degree turn and also had many obstacles on the road to see if the suspension would work correctly, and that the Mars 2020 rover can easily navigate through the small rocks in the Martian surface. This is the final test that they really need to get the Mars 2020 rover onto Mars. So thanks for watching. If you want to see more of my videos, please subscribe to this channel and like this video. In my next video, I'm going to talk about SpaceX's Starliner project and how it will impact the world. So thanks for watching.